Hi, I'm Justin Boyd.
And I'm Brittany Pacheco, and we are the Watchers in the Basement.
Welcome to the Watchers in the Basement. We're here today to discuss Ant-Man and the Wasp, the second film in the Ant-Man trilogy. Now, as we're recording this, it's February 15th. Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania is just a couple days away. In fact, I'm seeing it tomorrow night. But before we get to the Quantumania, let's talk about the second film, which was released July 6, 2018, with a runtime of 2 hours and 2 minutes, exactly 1 minute longer than the first Ant-Man movie. We'll talk about that in a little bit. With a box office of $622 million, so it was up about 110 or 12 million from the first movie, so that's an improvement.
Yeah.
Ant-Man and the Wasp was the 20th movie, or is the 20th movie in the MCU, and it fell in Phase 3 just right after Infinity War, which that comes into play in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Directed by Peyton Reed, who also directed Ant-Man, who will direct Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. It's a big cast. Stars Paul Rudd, Evangeline Lilly, Michael Peña, Walton Goggins, Bobby Cannavale, Judy Greer, T.I. Harris, David Dastmalchian, Hannah John-Kamen, Abby Ryder Fortson, Randall Park, Michelle Pfeiffer, and Laurence Fishburne. Oh, and Michael Douglas. So a lot of people in this movie.
Yep.
It's a fully loaded movie. Brittany, last week I asked you, do you remember when you first saw Ant-Man? Now, Ant-Man and the Wasp, we actually saw this movie together. Frank was with us. Several other people were with us. We saw this like as a big group of people.
We did.
So I was pretty high on the movie. I enjoyed the movie at the time. What were your thoughts of the movie then, and have they changed now that we've rewatched it 5 years later?
It has its highlights. It has its ups. It has, I think, maybe for me personally, a few more downs than ups, given that this is a sequel. And I think historically, with any sequel, it just doesn't do as well as its predecessor, in my personal opinion. This, for me, even though it was 1 minute longer than Ant-Man, the pacing of the movie felt so much longer.
Yeah.
Again, my personal opinion. Y'all can agree or disagree. That's totally fine. I just feel that this movie did not hold up to Ant-Man. Like I said, for me, with having rewatched Ant-Man recently, it's rewatchable. It's definitely rewatchable, and I enjoy it. It's got its action, comedy, the seriousness, what have you. With this movie, I feel was far more, maybe not serious. I mean, it's serious, obviously, because you're trying to get the background of Janet Van Dyne. You're trying to understand what this whole quantum realm sort of universe is, and you have to lay out that foundation. Yes, but I think it's just either because I'm not a science person and all of it just kind of went right over my head, or it was just dragged out too long. I don't quite know what it was. It just, for me, entertainment wise, wasn't as good as the first movie, which is Ant-Man, but it does have its highlights, and it I'll give it that. But I think it was just runtime. It was just, or pacing rather. It was just, it's not there for me, and it still holds up the same today.
Okay. Yeah, like when we saw this movie, I was pretty high on it after we saw it because it's a fun movie. We saw it in a group. We had a good time. And I realized that as we were getting ready to do this rewatch, I don't think I've ever gone back to rewatch this movie. Not one single time. It was one of the last movies that was actually on Netflix before all those movies went to Disney Plus. So I saw like maybe some parts and pieces of it on Netflix, but I never actually rewatched the movie. So on this rewatch, I agree with you as far as like, even though it's just a minute longer than the first one, it feels like a longer movie. And I think it's like we said, there's a lot of characters and they have to service those characters. And because of that, that's why the pacing makes it feels like it's kind of dragged out,
I think that's a fair assessment.
Yeah. There's so many characters. It's also like when we talked about Ant-Man, the first movie, I talked about how a lot of people kind of criticized Yellow Jacket, the villain, and they thought that was like a weak part of the movie, which I disagree with. But in this movie, the villain is pretty weak in that it is a villain that is Well, first of all, you've got a couple of people who are kind of the villain. You have Walter Goggins, his character, Sonny Birch,
Mhm.
like low level, like criminal who's trying to get PIM technology to sell on the black market. So he's like a street level villain. Then
Right.
you've got obviously Ghost slash Ava Starr,
Mhm.
played by the actress's name is Hannah John-Kamen, which also something about this actress is I'm not super familiar with her. Although looking up her credits, she was in Game of Thrones season 6, and she is going to be in the Thunderbolts. So her character Ghost is going to continue, but her character is kind of like a Ghost is very forgettable. Like
Yeah.
even in the movie. And she's not totally a villain. Like she is, but she isn't, So it's like this is a movie where the villain is solely there to move the plot along.
Mhm.
And it's not a villain where like a Killmonger or a Thanos or a Loki or
Yeah.
even like in Multiverse of Madness where you had oh gosh, the Scarlet Witch, where
Mhm.
like you kind of see their perspective and like if they were to like quote unquote win in the movie, you could see the movie continuing a different way and going a different approach. But in this movie, the villain is there solely just to keep the movie rolling. And it's maybe maybe the weakest villain in the MCU. Like, what do you think?
But but is it a villain worth having?
Right.
Really? Like I
Right.
I I think I can make the connection as to why they had Ghost or Ava because with trying to bring back Janet Van Dyne, and this is kind of just the plot of Ant-Man and the Wasp is that Ant-Man or Scott Lang, he has like a dream or a vision or some sort of connection where he goes back to the quantum realm and he sees a past memory that Janet Van Dyne puts into him. Now she's been living in this quantum realm for some 30 years,
30
right?
years.
And so she's connected with him because he went into the quantum and got out. And so and again, this is where because I'm not a science person, like I don't understand how all this works, but regardless, this is what gets the ball going. And then you just coincidentally have someone whose cells are broken down, torn apart, rebuilt all over again. She's in some sort of pain and she's phasing, and I'm talking
Right.
about Ghost or Ava,
Yeah.
but because of what Janet Van Dyne knows or because she's existed in the quantum realm, they're going to extract her being to help save Ava with the help of Laurence Fishburne's character, which is Bill Foster, who used to be
Right.
an associate with Hank Pym.
Mhm.
So it was a lot. It was a lot to absorb. And I'm
Right.
thinking, but why is this particular character necessary? Like, why? I could have understood if she was associated with the black market guy. Like I could have totally
Right.
understood her being like used as a weapon, kind of like Bucky. Bucky was used as a weapon as the Winter Soldier,
Mhm.
right? To carry Hydra's orders, and if they were affiliated in that sense, Ava and the black market guy, okay, cool, I get it. But she's just like on her own. I don't know if her story is necessary at this point, unless it's just to obviously introduce her into the universe. And if she's going to carry on in the Thunderbolts, okay, great. But like, did she need to be introduced at that particular moment in Phase 3? I don't know. I just don't feel like her character really carried any true weight.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm just being overly critical because I'm not a comic book reader. I don't know how her character is
Yeah.
in
Well, in the comic
Ant-Man.
books, the character is a man, or traditionally was a man, and they
Mhm.
switched, did a gender switch for the
It was
movie.
like Taskmaster and
Yeah, right.
Black Widow. Yeah.
But like you're right. You like right after this movie, like that's why like going back and watching this movie, there's so much this movie I forgot about. In fact, I feel like
Mm.
I forgot about the whole movie. Like
It's a forgettable movie.
I just remember like I remember enjoying it in the moment,
Mm.
and I rewatched it, and like I enjoyed the rewatch.
Mhm.
I did. It did feel like it was longer than it should have been,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, Paul Rudd's great as Ant-Man, and obviously, I think Evangeline Lilly looks the best of any. Like, she looks phenomenal in this movie, like in the
She does.
suit. Like her hair looks great. She doesn't have a bunch of wigs, which is kind of weird in the first movie. Um, I like the characters. I think the comedy in this movie is maybe slightly better, and that's why I remembered it more fondly.
That, and I think with Scott Lang's daughter too,
Yeah,
Cassie,
the
she had a
daughter's super
bigger
cute.
role.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, like she's grown up like so much more from the first time we met her.
Yeah.
She's wonderful. And of course, then you have Luis, I say Ti, but Dave and Kurt are back, and they have a little bit of well, Kurt at least has a little bit of a bigger role with talking about Baba Yaga, you know, the boogeyman or the witch or whatever you call it. And I mean, like I said, ultimately, Justin, I just don't know if it was necessary to bring in her ghost unless she had been affiliated with the black market guy and was going to apprehend the lab and everything for his purposes, not for her own, because if, you know, she's phasing, she's ultimately sentenced to die at some point because they can't find a cure. I don't know. It was just strange. I mean, I love seeing Laurence Fishburne in the movie too. I love just his demeanor. He can play any role whatsoever. He has a moral compass, if you will. And great seeing him in the MCU. I just really do not understand fully why it was necessary to have Ghost as like the villain, but then she's not a villain.
Yeah, I mean, it was like she's kind of a low level villain in the movie, and then like, well, I mean, she's like kind of the main villain, but like, it's like kind of a soft introduction to the MCU for the character, I guess. But then I don't think anybody's like clamoring for that character to come back. And I mean, not that I have anything against the actress, like, you know, get the work and do your job and everything.
No, absolutely.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, she is apparently going to be in the Thunderbolts movie. So, I mean, that's cool. But I mean, I don't think anybody like was like, oh God, we have to get Ghost back in the MCU.
Yeah. And I don't know if how you want to talk about all this movie, Justin, but like her, as I've mentioned, she wants the lab. And I keep saying the lab because Pym and Hope, they're on the run post Scott having taken the suit to Germany in Captain America Civil War. He's been on house arrest for the last, two years or something like that. Yeah. But he has supposedly had no contact with Hank and Hope. Right. And when they do meet up, it's because of the fact that Scott called and said to Hank, hey, I had a dream. It dealt with your wife. Like, I don't know if this means anything. And so that's why they're reunited and what have you. But because Hank and Hope have been in hiding, you know, they first say the house is gone, the lab is gone, like everything is gone, but it really isn't, because Hank used his technology to shrink his whole lab, the building, the same with his home. He's got like a set of Hot Wheels, you know, that he uses as cars to get around. And that's how they've been able to stay out of, you know, eyesight of the FBI. So I thought that was great. I think that was clever. That was fun, of course. But, you know, they ultimately are trying to see about getting Janet Van Dyne back from the quantum realm and how she has been able to adapt in the quantum in order to survive. And then she sees Ava like at the very end. She's like, I think I know how I can help you. And she puts her fingers to Ava's temples and generates some sort of energy. And that's helping, you can see it helping Ava not phase, you know, because she's like she can have her hands still, but like there's movement all around her. And then somehow like she's cured. Like there's no real explanation behind that. Like,
yeah.
Again, I don't know if this was warranted.
Yeah, it is very forgettable. I mean, I think like it was fun in the moment, but it is a very forgettable movie. And maybe it is the most forgettable movie in the MCU.
It's
got to.
I think next to the Guardians movies, and then for sure Captain Marvel. This movie is definitely at the bottom of my list.
Right.
Go check out our rankings, y'all.
Yeah, we ranked the first 30, and spoiler alert, it's not last. Like
this movie is not last.
The Ant-Man movies are both like, I think they're right next to each other, and they're not at the very bottom. So, but yeah, go check it out. We ranked the first 30 films in the MCU. Of course, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania is number 31. It kicks off Phase 5 just in a few days. But yeah, go back and check out our rankings. Um, yeah, you're mentioning that's one of the things I wanted to talk about as far as what I really liked about the movie. I liked all the miniature, the miniature cars and they shrink the lab and they shrink their home and I think all that stuff really works well in this movie. Like with the
It's
and
appropriate.
conversely, like whenever Ant-Man becomes Giant Man, or they blow up like objects like the Hello Kitty Pez dispenser, like when you know,
Hmm.
it's turned into like this like 20-foot thing in the street, and that was cool. All that stuff looks great. Just
Hmm.
as a continuation from Ant-Man, they kind of kept that the VFX are great.
I mean, even the ants,
The
like
ants are great.
they're
Yeah,
so much larger than when we first met them. I mean, at the very end of Ant-Man, one of these ants was kind of blown up in size, and that's a messed up looking dog. But now we've got
right,
more ants that are building the tunnel for the quantum to go into the quantum realm, and we've got one ant who's pretending to be Scott. As I mentioned, Scott's under house arrest, and he's just days away from being released, and so Hank and Hope are like, okay, well, we're gonna put the ankle bracelet around that ant, and it's gonna, you know, be you with your habits. You sleep 9 hours a day, you watch TV for 5 hours a day, you
right.
play the drum. Like, what are you, 15? Like,
Yeah,
it's great. Those moments are wonderful. Like I said, this movie does have highlights. I do appreciate the comedy uh, aspect of it. I just pacing. Good lord, pacing just
yeah.
damn near killed me. Like on this rewatch, Justin, I looked at my phone several times because it's just like it's dragging. I didn't do that at all with Ant-Man.
Yeah, I just kept like pausing it to check like how much time's left. Like I did that several times because it felt like it was like, oh, this is almost over, but no, it's
Yeah.
not. And I think what we're talking about is kind of what Peyton Reed was talking about a few months back whenever he said that, he thinks the first two Ant-Man movies were kind of palate cleansers because the first Ant-Man movie was directly after Age of Ultron, right? A huge Avengers movie. There's a lot of
Mhm.
fallout from that. And then obviously Ant-Man the Wasp was directly after Infinity War. And obviously with Infinity War, we lose a bunch of characters that are snapped out of existence.
Yep.
And so it kind of makes sense that you get not so much not that they're going to for like an unforgettable for a forgettable movie, but you get kind of a low level movie to kind of build you back up to a year later we have, in game. So if you look at like how it's positioned, it makes sense. But like a movie unto itself, it's not the best. And that's
Yeah.
the nicest way to put it. But you know what? Honestly, I still feel like it's like kind of neck and neck with Ant-Man, the first one. I feel like they're very close to me because like I mean the villain is better in the first one.
Mhm.
I think the comedy's better in the second one. I think there's more Luis. There, he has his story. He's more
And then
seems like
you're
he's more involved.
incorporating, yeah,
Yeah.
you're incorporating the other actors
Yeah.
in his storytelling. You have Paul Rudd who's mouthing the dialogue as Luis is telling the story. Same thing with Evangeline Lilly, and
Yeah.
it's funny to just see them kind of portray how Luis tells his story, right? And even when I say Paul, but it's really Scott Lang. When
Yeah.
Scott Lang is in the laboratory with Hope and Hank, and they're trying to see if this tunnel will work, well, he also gets to play more or less Janet Van Dyne.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's embodied
Right.
by
Right.
Janet Van Dyne, and the mannerisms completely change. It's
Mhm.
just like, oh, like we just have to do a little bit of calibration, and when Hank's like, Janet, and then Paul Scott looks at him and just kind of like touches his face like in
Yeah.
this loving sort of affectionate way, and it's so funny watching these actors portray other actors. Like, I'm sure they had Michelle Pfeiffer, kind of act out the scene. It's like, okay, this is how I would deliver the lines and mannerisms, what have you. And Paul is going to have to mimic that. Like, I think that's if I hope that's what happened. Otherwise, if Paul just did it 100% like on his own, brilliant. That was gold.
Yeah, no, that's a highlight of the movie for sure. Because
Hmm.
like you said, then Hank is referring to Scott Lang as honey because it's like Janet Van Dyne is like has overtaken his body or whatever.
They're
And then
holding
yeah,
hands. Yeah.
Scott refers to Hope as Jelly Bean, which is what her
Mhm.
mother called her,
Yeah.
in the past. Yeah, no, I totally agree with that.
Mhm.
Another big highlight, and you mentioned this before, is Cassie Lang. Um, so many like funny, like cute moments. I love the 911 call when they're basically like being held up by Bill Foster and by Ghost,
Mhm.
and she's texting him, and he's like, "Okay, it's my daughter. Like, I need to find out what she's calling about." And she's like,
Mhm.
she calls and like they FaceTime or whatever, and she's like, "I can't find my soccer shoes. I have a game tomorrow." Like
That's a
that's a
911
911
call.
call. The world's greatest grandma trophy is like hilarious that she
Well,
got him that because there were no like I'm guessing there was no like world's greatest dad trophies at the store, and so she just got
right.
him the closest one. Yeah.
Like their sense of humor is obviously she gets his sense of humor.
Yeah.
Like she gets it from him, obviously.
Yeah.
They're two peas in a pod. And to kick off when we see the two of them together, because before he wasn't allowed to have like any contact with Cassie because he had just gotten out of prison, hadn't paid
Mhm.
child support, and now they're spending time together. He's at his house, and it's like, oh, we're in a tunnel, and we've got to figure out where the treasure is and what have you. Oh, look, the great aunt Anton, just a paper mache ant
Right.
thing, and so he's built this like play thing, this tunnel, so that he can entertain Cassie when she comes and visits him. And I think that's just beautiful. I love seeing parent relationships like that. Like you go out of your way to entertain your child. She's like, I don't know what, 8, 10 years old at this point,
Mhm.
and she plays along. She plays along with him. They're both enjoying their time together, and of course, it ends in the FBI coming into the house because in this slide thing, their escape route, Scott's foot goes through the fence and his ankle monitor is on it and it's breached the perimeter, if you will. So, and even Cass just kind of like, really, guys, like, why can't you just leave my dad alone? Like, go away.
Yeah. No, and I like how I think this kind of will lead to what happens in Ant-Man and the Lost Quantumania. When Cassie's talking to her dad and she talks about how like, he needs a partner and she wants to be his partner, but then he's like, no, it's gonna be Hope.
Hmm.
Um, but I think we're gonna see that, in Quantumania, Cassie joins in on the superhero like family thing.
She most certainly will. And I mean, it's important to rewatch this movie, especially because this is dealing a lot with the quantum realm and uh, how things work differently inside that world as opposed
Yeah.
to the one that we live in. So it's it's essential. The pacing again of this movie was just not there for me.
Mhm.
The villain was not that great, in my opinion, but the information that Janet has from living there in the last 30 years is going to obviously be very essential when it comes down to Quantumania.
Mhm.
So, not my favorite movie, but it's important to rewatch.
Yeah, I'm kind of there with you. I mean, I like it a little more than you do, but yeah,
Yes, you do.
it's not one of the MC's best. I'll put it that
Mm-mm.
way. But it's the introduction of Randall Park as Jimmy Woo, right?
Yeah, it is.
Which the character, he's like it's so funny because him and Scott Lang, they have such a funny back and forth because Scott has learned magic at this like online magic college,
Yep.
and he's like Jimmy Woo is like completely like mesmerized by it. He wants to learn magic, and that's part of his character going forward. Um,
And it actually we'll see Jimmy Woo again in WandaVision, and when he introduces himself to Rambo, I can't think of her first name off the top of my head, but he
Monica, yeah.
is it Monica? Yeah, he does his sleight of hand with his business card. It's the same sleight of hand that Scott did to him. And he's like, can you just show me how to do that? And so obviously this is a very big part of Jimmy Woo and how Scott has impacted him with magic. And so he's going to learn that sleight of hand as well and show the world.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting that the fact that I don't believe T.I. or Michael Peña are in Quantumania. I'm kind of surprised that those characters,
Very
those
sad.
actors aren't going to be in the movie. That, to me, that's not a good decision. And
No.
I haven't seen Quantumania yet, but I have read some spoiler-free reviews, and people are pretty mixed on this movie. And when people are mixed, it tends to be more negative than positive. So
Thanks.
I'm kind of concerned as I'm going to see that tomorrow, and then of course we'll have a review of Quantumania sometime next week when everyone hopefully has had a chance to see it.
But it's curious too, because a lot of these movies you feel like, oh, they said something or did something, and that's going to set up for their next appearance, right? In the next movie. And with Luis, at one point, they're escaping the bad guys. They're escaping the black market guys and trying to get the lab from Ghost. And so he's in the car with Hope, and he says to her like, oh, I really like your suit.
Right.
And he goes, I'd like to have a suit that has like even just minimal powers,
right?
Or just a suit that has like no powers at all. Like, he just wants to be included. He wants to feel included.
Yeah.
Right. But for me, thinking back, like, oh, that would have been like a great kind of way of planting that seed of maybe Luis is going to take part in the next movie, and maybe he'll get a suit from Hank, or have to wear the suit, one of the old suits that Hank had, or I don't know, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, to me, that just would have seemed appropriate. And then it's like, how are you going to not have both Luis and Dave, T.I.'s character? Like, is Kurt for sure going to be in it too? Like,
I think he's playing a different character, which is very strange.
Oh, I did hear about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, one thing I've heard about this movie is Quantumania is very strange. It's been described as Marvel's weirdest movie yet. So we'll see. I mean, obviously you're going to this quantum realm, and I think most of the movie is spent in the quantum realm. So what we've seen from the quantum realm is very strange.
Yeah. And people want to hate on Doctor Strange. Okay.
Hey, we didn't hate that movie.
We did not.
We both liked that movie. Yeah.
Very much like that movie. Yeah, both movies for that matter. But sure. Okay. To each their own. Exactly. It's fine. You're wrong, but fine. Yeah, no, go ahead.
No, I was going to say another funny moment in the movie in Ant-Man and the Wasp is the whole truth serum gag where, the street level criminals, they have like this guy who basically injects people with is a truth serum, but he's like, the guy's like, no, it's not truth serum. But then, Dave and Kurt and Luis are like, yeah, it's truth serum. Like, it sounds like truth serum. That's what it is. And I like whenever, Luis is injected with the stuff and he ends up giving up where, Hank and Hope and Scott are located. But he also, when he's talking to Scott on the phone, he's like, I hate the way you load the dishwasher. He's like, because it just, the truth serum is making him say things he wouldn't normally say out loud. And he's like, who puts the plates on the top shelf? Like, no one does that.
Yeah, that's true. Sorry, I'm trying to like get my camera back in focus. But yeah, I mean, just how upset he was over that. It was really funny. And then how, the guy who administered the truth serum, he, at the very end, tables got turned on him and the black market guy, Sonny, was that his name?
Sonny Birch. Yeah,
Sonny Birch. And then like another henchman at the very end of the movie. They're at Fisherman's Wharf, and they were quote unquote apprehended by Dave and Kurt. They're given the truth serum and admit to the cops like, hey, these are the things that I did. And also I have many health code violations at my restaurant, some that would shock you. And then dude who had first administered the truth serum to the other guys, he looks at the pouch and he's like, wow, it is truth serum.
Yeah, so there's a lot of good comedy in the movie.
Oh, for sure.
And there's a lot of great like chase scenes. There's a van chase scene through
Mm-hmm.
what is meant to be like downtown San Francisco. The
They go
Hot
down
Wheels, yeah,
they go down Lombard Street, which is the most crookedest street in the United States. I've been there, and
right.
it's crazy.
The Hot Wheels cars. That's a cool. Whenever they break out this box of Hot Wheels cars, and then Luis
Yep.
is driving this like this like flamed
It's
purple
purple.
little sport car. Yeah, that was cool.
Mm-hmm.
I think the very end of the movie is really cool. I completely forgot about it because Hope and Scott are on a date, and Cassie's in the back seat, and they're like at a drive-in movie, but
Mm-hmm.
they pan out and they show that like they're in the miniature Hot Wheels cars, and they're watching a laptop. Like
Yeah.
that was really, I completely forgot about that part. That was
I
so
did
cool.
too.
Yeah.
I did too. Yeah. So it's like, okay, wait, how can they all shrink if they're not wearing the suit? Like including
Yeah.
Cassie.
I know in this movie, they just like, if you're in the car or in the whatever you shrink to, I guess it just, they kind of,
Oh
they
yeah. Fair
expanded the
point.
science, or it just became easier to like, you can shrink and enlarge everything and all the time. And,
There's
um,
there's there's still some hiccups with all that too. Just I'm
you
thinking
would
in
think
terms
so.
of spacing
Right.
with the other cars. It's like the car needed to be this big before you shrink it down to this big. So how
Right.
did the other cars not get affected? Anyway, I'm really thinking too hard about this, y'all. Sorry. Just
Yeah.
continuity is just really important to me, and those little
Yeah.
goofs like tend to bother me, but I'm just gonna let it go.
But
Yeah.
but that all that stuff all leads to good comedic moments. Like whenever he has to go back to Cassie's school to get the world's greatest grandma trophy so he can find the old Ant-Man suit, which is
That
taped
he
under it,
destroyed,
right, that he
quote
destroyed.
unquote. Mhm.
Like he's like, he can't control the belt or whatever on his suit, and he keeps like getting way too big or way too small, and then he's basically the size of a small child, so he like
Mhm.
throws on this hoodie and runs through the hallway to get out of there. Like
I know what that's like. Yeah, because even like Hope is taunting him. She's like, "Oh," like when
yeah,
he's jumping to try to get the backpack from the cubby, and she's just standing there. She's like, "Oh, you almost got it. Like, there you go. You can do it." I'm like, bunch of assholes. Like, as someone who is vertically challenged, help us out, okay? Help us out. Yeah, no,
exactly.
him, just even going down the stairs outside to go back into the van, and he's just like, the stairs are just too big, and he's got to take him like two at a time, not two at a time, 2 feet at a time, right?
Mhm.
Jumps into the van and sits in the chair. And they're like, "How was school today?" It's like, "Do you want a juice box and string cheese?" And he's like, "Do you really have that?"
That's funny. That was funny. What'd
Yeah.
you think about the claymation kind of credits? I thought those were really cool.
That I think is amazing looking. Like,
Is it claymation or what would you call it?
I don't call it claymation. I'm thinking about all the old toys my brother used to have, and I don't know if it's like metal or something, but I don't know because I think they dealt with the Hot Wheels cars. I don't know if the same like manufacturer also did like little figurines that
Okay.
were maybe metal or plastic or just like really very detailed painted little figurines.
Mhm.
That's what kind of reminded me of. But I think the scenes for the end credits in whatever material that is was really cool looking. Like especially the scene where you have giant Ant-Man
Mhm.
and he's in the water, and to convey like the splash of the water and just how that looks. That I don't know, it was really really cool looking.
Yeah.
I really liked it.
Yeah.
I think
That's
that was better
definitely.
than the whole movie.
Well, I mean that you're right. The credits kind of tell the movie like in these recreated scenes, and
Basically.
it looks really cool. Like I wish I had that like that art piece or whatever, some of
Mhm.
that stuff because it looks really incredible.
It does. It does
So
for
let's talk
sure.
about, so this movie has a mid-credit and a post-credit scene,
Mhm.
and just a heads up, I've heard that Quantumania has a mid-credit and a post-credit. So be sure to stick around if you're going to see the movie. Stick around through the credits, as always. Marvel trained us, but it's got a mid and a post, just
It's a,
like
it's a good rule of thumb.
Ant-Man and the Wasp. Yeah. So let's talk about the mid-credit first.
Mhm.
In the mid-credit, we see Janet, Scott, and Hope. Well, Hank, Janet, Scott, and Hope are using the X-Con van as their, and X-Con, by the way, is the company that Louise, Scott, Kurt, and Dave have founded since the first
Brilliant
movie.
name.
Yeah, that's
Ex-con security. Like,
their
talk about an
security. Yeah,
oxymoron.
yeah. So they have this old school van
Yeah.
that Hank and Janet, Scott, and Hope are using it as their new tunnel to the quantum realm. Right.
Yep.
Scott goes subatomic and he enters the quantum realm. He's supposed to go in there, get in there, and get back. He's only in there for a little bit, but while he's in there, the Thanos snap from Infinity War happens. And as we see, as he's like radioing them, like, "Hey guys, like I'm ready to come back. What's going on?" We see them turn to ash.
Mm-hmm.
And I do remember the post credit scene because I remember like we were all like, okay, like because this is the movie directly after Infinity War, and we're like, okay, how are they going to explain why Ant-Man and the Wasp weren't a part of Infinity War? Where were they? And then we get that this happened at the same time as that's happening. And, he's stuck in the quantum realm.
Yep.
Until, Endgame, of course. Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
But I thought that was really cool. I think that's one of the better mid-credit scenes. Honestly, just because of the weight of Infinity War and how we saw Spider-Man and Black Panther and all these characters like just turn to dust.
Yeah.
To see that continue in the next movie, at the time and even looking back now, I thought it was really cool. What do you think about that?
That was well placed. That was story wise. That was very well done, and it's even sad to say that the mid credit I think was better than the whole movie altogether.
But it had more stakes. It
had way more stakes.
It furthered what because Infinity War at the time was, I think, was easily the best Marvel superhero movie, and I think it's one of the best ever. Yeah. And that just continued the story right away. This is just a couple months after Infinity War. So
yeah, and for me, I have my more emotional problems with Infinity War, and I just don't like the idea of that, like, people just disintegrated, and that's hard. That's like traumatic, right? Obviously, people that you love, people that mean so much to the world and what have you. And for Scott, he is completely helpless. Like, he's stuck in a world where he can't get back on his own. Or could he? Because he was able to get out the first time from the quantum realm in Ant-Man 1. So it's just like, you couldn't have like done the reverse thing or whatever it was that you did in Ant-Man and get out that way. Like, because the reason he went in was to get energy from the quantum to help Ava and heal her and what have you. So he has like this little like container thing, sucks up the energy. And so he's just there with it. And then the whole family, Hope, Janet, and Hank are gone at random. And so then you're kind of like at that time, or now having done the rewatch, it's like, okay, well, but what happened to Ava? Like, I mean, Scott just kind of like abandoned everything within reason, because he's concerned about his wife. He's concerned about Cassie. He's concerned about what happened with, Hank Pym and them. And it's just like, but what happened to Ava? This again goes back to, was she a worthy character for this movie? Like, it didn't carry. Okay, sorry, had to get off that soapbox. So, but the mid credit definitely had so much more weight to it because he's completely helpless. He can't escape, which, as I just said, I'm sure there could have been a way, but it was written the way that it was written. It's fine.
Yeah. No, good mid-credit scene. Of course, we find out what happens in Endgame. So
yeah,
if you haven't seen Endgame yet, definitely check that out before you see Quantumania, of course.
Yes, and also check out our Endgame review that we did several years ago.
Yeah,
here
long
on
time
our channel.
ago. Yeah, that was our first MCU movie that we ever reviewed.
It was.
Yep.
Jeez, that was a long time ago.
We're coming up on 5 years doing this, so
insane.
Very cool. Yeah. So, then the post-credit scene is just kind of a jokey post-credit where we have, is it Anton?
No, I don't think it's Anton. It's an unnamed ant as far as I'm concerned, but I think it was the one who was pretending to be Scott. It was programmed to be Scott under house arrest.
Yeah, okay. And he's playing the drums,
Playing the drums.
Playing the drums just like Scott was earlier in the movie. So
sure.
Yeah,
Let's go with
it's
that.
funny. It's
It
a
was a
funny.
little bit. It was a little bit of a weird okay, wait, you did the mid credit that way, but then you're gonna end the post credit with this, and then black screen, Ant-Man and the Wasp will return?
Yeah.
Question mark. Like that was brilliant. Like that was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious if the mid and end or post credit in Quantumania is going to be similar. God.
I've heard that they're both kind of cool, but one of them, the execution is not great. So again, I don't know what that means. I don't know.
We shall see.
I mean, the one thing, I don't think this is a spoiler, but Peyton Reed, the director, he had said that, he was hoping that the third Ant-Man movie, meaning Quantumania, would be like an Avengers level story. So I wonder, and I haven't heard anything, but I wonder if we're going to see some Avengers in this movie.
Or variations of Avengers.
I think, right. I think that's probably what we're going to see. Because I don't know that we're going to see, because at this point, we're not really sure who's an Avenger or who's like organized, as far as an event. So
I think because even from the trailer, there's a line that Kang says, and it's kind of referencing Thor. He's like, "Well, I haven't killed you yet." He goes, "You're not the one with you're not the god with the hammer," or something along those lines. He makes reference to Mjolnir. You're not, and it was a reference to a different character, a different like Avenger type character. So it's very curious if we could see variations of Avengers, and if they're played by the same actors that we already know, or if it's going to be a completely different actor. I don't know. I don't know, because I think we've kind of speculated that villain from Ant-Man, Yellow Jacket, Corey Stoll.
Corey Stoll's the actor. Yeah.
There's talk that he's in this movie in Quantumania.
Yeah, he is
playing a different character. So
yeah.
It's possible. Anything's possible at this point, because now we're dealing with the multiverse, and Kang is he who remains, and he kind of manipulates time.
Yeah. I mean, I have heard, no surprise that Jonathan Majors as Kang is great. That seems like that's like the main thing people are saying about the movie. But
it's gonna be a major year.
Creed 3 is coming up in early March, so he's Creed's opponent in that movie. So yeah, he's got a big year, no doubt about that. So anyway, Brittany, final thoughts on Ant-Man and the Wasp.
It's a necessary movie leading into Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. Of course, that you get your first kind of understandings of the quantum realm, how it works, the introduction of Janet Van Dyne, because I really feel like she's going to have a big role to play in Quantumania. To what extent, I don't know. On our trailer review, if you will, or reaction, however you want to call that, we kind of speculated about who may survive and who may not. Go back and check that out, and hear our thoughts on that. But I think Janet's going to have a big role to play. No doubt, of course, Scott and even Cassie. I mean, Cassie's a young woman now, and she, like you mentioned in this movie, she wanted to be his partner, and in a way she's going to be, I'm sure. And I'm not a huge fan of this movie, Ant-Man and the Wasp. It had its moments. I think just too many characters that ultimately didn't go anywhere, I think, for now. I think it could have maybe been done a little bit different, and the pacing was just, it wasn't there for me. It probably could have been a shorter movie. Let's just be real. So what are your final thoughts?
No, this is a fine movie. It is. There are obviously some good moments. We talked about all that stuff. But yeah, I tend to agree with you. It's feels like a little bit too long, and it's kind of jumbled up, and it's not one of the better MCU movies. But there's stuff in there that you need to watch it just so you can further continue this story, this interconnected universe.
Absolutely.
Which is that is the brilliant part of an interconnected universe. It's like a TV show where you have to watch every episode to kind of to be fully invested and understand the story. So
For sure.
overall, it's fine, but it's not one of my favorites. So
No, and I think this was the first time since we saw it in theaters that I've actually rewatched it. So
yeah,
that tells
same
you
boat.
something.
Yeah, same boat. So now you know what we think about Ant-Man and the Wasp. We want to know what you think. Brittany, how can people tell us what they think about this movie?
Leave a comment down below, but first make sure you are subscribed to this YouTube channel as well as like this video. It does help out. It would help me to talk first and foremost. It would help us out immensely. We are on the road to, as Frank said, 500 subscribers. Let's go ahead and get it. We're at 222, I believe, at time of recording. So we're getting subs, Justin. I'm happy about that. Thank you to everyone.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
For sure. But do not forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as well. Search at Watcher's Basement. Use that same hashtag, Watcher's Basement, to help grow our audience. Tell people across the multiverse about us, your friends, your neighbors, your family, strangers. I don't care. Just tell them about us and help grow our audience. And lastly, we also have audio podcasts available to you on Apple, Google, and Spotify, thanks to anchor.fm. Be sure to give us a 5-star rating.
Thank you, Brittany. I appreciate it. So for Brittany, this is Justin saying we'll see you next time when we review Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, next week. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
And remember, you're the world's greatest grandma.